Welcome to Frame Up, the show that explores the lives of the crew and cast on a film set. I'm your host, Marco Gutierrez. Let's get framed up. Hello and welcome. So today I'm actually really excited because I'm in the studio with Kimberly Hamilton. Kimberly, how are you?
I am doing well, thank you.
Yeah, we've been talking about doing this for a while, so I'm glad you're finally here.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're, you do a lot of things. You're an actress, writer. You've directed some of your own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So let's dive into that. How did you get into acting, and why acting?
Well, I started taking dance classes when I was about 3 years old, and I started taking ballet, jazz, and tap. Ballet was my first love when I was, and I actually still have memories, believe it or not, from when I was like 3 to 5 years old of being on stage as a ballerina. So I think that really sparked my joy of performing on stage, was growing up as a very young dancer, dancing on stage and moving to the rhythm of music. I just loved it. And so I think that sort of initiated my passion for performing in general.
Okay.
And then I started
taking... I was going to say, because ballet is also a storytelling medium. So
absolutely. Yeah. And I actually teach ballet now to young kids, which I love. When I was about 10 years old, I took my first acting class, and I had a lot of fun with it. I was also really shy. I went through this period when I was in middle school where I was just very shy, hormones, very awkward. I didn't know how to talk to people. And the more acting classes I took, the more I felt like, oh, I can express myself through this medium in a fun way. So acting really helped me come out of my shell.
Interesting. I'm surprised it wasn't dance, because for me it was dance when I started doing swing dance.
Swing dance? How long ago was that?
Not that long ago. It was in probably 15 years ago.
So swing dance helped you kind of come out of your shell? Yeah, I feel like...
Especially because it was partner dancing. So
oh, yeah. You have to kind of like develop a connection right away. What I love about dance is it's a language beyond words. It's a way of expressing yourself beyond words, telling a story without words, which I love. So dance...
Which is great, because sometimes you get stuck in exposition. It's like, if you can express that through movement and body language, it's so much more powerful.
Yes. And I feel like as a child, I had a lot to express, but oftentimes, whether it was social anxiety or whatever, I couldn't find the words. And so dance really helped me feel like I was expressing my emotions in like a fun, creative way beyond words. And then I started learning how to talk and acting. The more acting classes I took, the more I loved it. And when I was in high school, I was part of the drama club. I performed in a bunch of shows. Musical theater was my favorite because I got to dance and act and sing. And I used to have a really, really like meek and shy voice, because as a child, I was very meek and shy. Acting taught me how to project my voice and use my breath. And so I performed in a bunch of high school shows. It was really, really fun. I often got cast as the ingenue. I went to the thespian conference and all that stuff. And then in college, I majored in theater and performance studies. So I got a BFA. So I took a lot of theater classes, but also film production, screenwriting. So within that BFA, I studied a lot, not just theater, but film as well. And then after college, I was a professional actor / waitress. I got an agent during college, actually.
Nice.
But I think I had an unrealistic expectation about like my booking rate. And because I did book a few things right after college, but I didn't really book as much as I was hoping. So I decided to take a risk and just start with a corporate job. So I was a marketing manager for this company. Well, I started out as like the events marketer, and then eventually I, quickly crawled up the corporate ladder, and then I was managing the whole company.
Oh, wow.
Hiring people, firing people, training people. And I was young and in my 20s, and I didn't realize that I was being overworked and underpaid because it was like my first big corporate job.
Right.
And I was wearing all these corporate hats. And so I put my acting career on the back burner.
Because it's like you have a career, so you might as well focus on that. And then,
Yeah, but it only took like a little over a year before I realized this job was just not good for my health. I was so stressed, I got shingles.
Oh my gosh.
And usually you don't get shingles unless you've had a traumatic, stressful experience, or you're just really unhealthy, like in your 70s, 80s. So anyway, long story short, I quit the corporate job, and then I started getting into health and fitness, and went through a yoga teacher training and getting all these certifications to teach fitness and nutrition.
Which you still do today.
I still do that today. And then I slowly but surely got back into acting classes, and I've trained with some of the best teachers here in Atlanta. So I'm fortunate enough I was able to train with some really great teachers in Atlanta, and then I started writing and producing my own short films. And
but you have the perfect background for that, especially the producing part. Especially when you have to deal with logistics and people.
Yeah. And there was another. It's funny. I've been pursuing acting, filmmaking off and on throughout my whole life, because there was another short period of time where I got another corporate job, same thing, but I only stuck with it for like a year. And then I quickly realized I can't sit behind a desk, like working a job that isn't fulfilling.
Right.
I'm good at sales, because with sales, it's very much acting. Sales jobs, you're acting 100%. But if I'm not selling a product that I feel good about, that I feel is really going to impact people in a positive way, I don't feel good about the job. So it's like soul sucking.
Yeah.
And there's
something to that, because I quit my job in news for that same reason.
Oh, really?
That it was, my colleagues are great. My coworkers, they were fantastic. But I felt like I was reporting bad news all the time. I was like, this is getting depressing.
I don't know why news stations, there's this one, I try not to spend too much time on social media, but there's this one Instagram that I love to follow. It's the Good News Instagram, where they only share good news. I wish there were more outlets like that.
Yeah.
That focus more on the positive news.
Exactly.
That's why I don't watch a lot of news stations. I want to be informed, but so much of it is so depressing. And who knows if a lot of it's propaganda, and I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but I get why you would quit that eventually.
Yeah.
You want to feel good about your work. You want to feel
that's ultimately what it was.
Yeah.
It's like,
you want to feel like you're making a positive impact. So
yeah, it's like, let's put good energy out there. Let's put good vibes.
So now I'm at a point where I am acting, writing, producing, and I'm also helping people get healthy. I'm a health coach. I teach ballet, yoga, tai chi, meditation, nutrition, Pilates, boot camp. So I teach a lot.
Boot camp.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
But I love making movies and telling stories that impact lives in a meaningful way.
Yeah, let's get into that a little bit, because if we're talking about character development, your background actually puts you in a really interesting position to really bring out the most of a character. So how would you approach a character on a script?
So it would depend on the script. It would depend on the type of character. So I've trained with some of the best teachers in Atlanta. I've studied Meisner. I've studied Stanis. I've studied all the methods, right? And I use a variety of methods sometimes when I'm approaching a character. It also depends on the director who I'm working with and the actor who I'm working with.
Right, your co-stars, yeah.
The methods I use change every every performance. I'm not married to one method. I'm not like, oh, I always do Meisner. I always am a method actor, or I always do emotional. I change it up. It depends on the context. Mm-hmm. So, but typically, there are some things that I have a process that is somewhat standard. I read the script and I start asking myself. I minored in psychology as well.
Nice.
So okay. I often just start there.
Yeah. To really get an idea of where the character's coming from.
Yeah, I just psychoanalyze the character. Mm-hmm. I start thinking about what their motives are, the who, what, where, when, and why, the given circumstances. Mm-hmm. And I do a lot of research. Where is this character from? What was their upbringing? Why are they the way they are? What they want out of life, and what they want within each scene from the people that they're interacting with, what they want and what they're willing to do to get what they want. So I think about all those things. And then oftentimes I'll just go through the text, and under each line, I'll write subtext. Sometimes I'll even come up with like an objective and a tactic, and I'll write it all out. And then I typically do a lot of homework and character research. And then in the moment when I'm on set or on stage, I trust that homework's going to be there, and I'd let go and just allow myself to be present in the moment with my partner, and trust that all that work will be there, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. With film, it's not always like you're not shooting linear in a linear way. It's not like, okay, we're going to shoot the beginning of the story, the middle of the story, and then the end of the story. Sometimes with film, you start shooting the end of the story.
Right.
So I just, I have to think about where this character is at in this given circumstance, and just be present and surrender to the moment, surrender to what's real in the moment. Oftentimes I put a lot of attention on my acting partner. And if especially if I trust my acting partner,
right.
I put all my attention on them, and whatever happens. I leave myself alone. I don't even know what I'm saying, or I trust that the lines are going to be there if I've memorized them. But I think focusing on my partner and not worrying about myself really helps a lot in certain contexts. But it just depends on, I used to teach classes, and I still do occasionally teach pop-up classes, but I used to teach yoga for actors consistently at the Robert Mello studio, which is a great studio, by the way. I studied a lot with Rob Mello, Meisner training. And I would talk about like when you're on your yoga mat, the whole point is to forget about the past, forget about the future, and just be present with your breath and with your body and with your mind and what's happening on the mat. And I used to teach how you can integrate that sense of presence and mindfulness into your art as an actor, because acting is all about forgetting who you were before, who you're going to be after, and just surrendering to the present moment,
to what's happening
within that story, within that context. So I often go to my yoga methods too, and that really helps.
That's great, because yoga is all about, your breathing and getting inside yourself. And
I often think, what does this character breathe like? If is this character a calm person? Okay, then maybe I should take some deep breaths before I perform. Is this character an anxious person? Okay, maybe I should take some shallow breaths before I perform. Breath work is a useful tool that you can use as far as like a warm up and a cool down after an acting performance. So a lot of my yoga training can come into play as an actor.
No, I think that's great. Between that and your experience in dance, you're communicating not just your lines through what you're saying, but how you're moving with them.
Oh yeah, the mind and body are one. And every thought we think has a physiological reaction in the body. And oftentimes our nervous system can't tell the difference between our imagined reality and what's really happening. Mm-hmm. So if you're a dedicated actor and you're imagining, if you're a dedicated actor and you're imagining something traumatic that's happening to you within the story, like for instance, I produced this show called Constellations, and I had to imagine every night on stage that I was going through this traumatic experience. And my nervous system felt very, very taxed. And my yoga practices really helped me unwind after that performance. The breathing techniques, the movement, it helps me reset my nervous system after playing a role that can be very emotionally taxing.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, I've the few times that I've had the privilege to work with you have been comedic roles.
Yeah.
And you have a very, I would say, Aubrey Plaza kind of delivery, which is great,
I've heard that before. Like, people have told me before that I remind them of Aubrey Plaza. I think that I just get bored easily. And so I think that's sort of like the tone that comes off when I'm a little bored.
Well, it's great. Like, it's kind of like that deadpan kind of humor. Yeah,
yes,
exactly.
Yeah. When I love comedy because I feel like laughter is very healing. Laughter releases stress. And when you are reminded that just not to take yourself so seriously, it's very healing. I feel like the whole world could use more comedy, could use more laughter. I love making people laugh. So comedy is probably my favorite genre to write, to act in. It's just fun. It's more fun. I feel like a lot of actors can oftentimes fall into the trap, and I've fallen into this trap before, where I'm feeling too precious about my art, where I'm taking it too seriously to the point that it's not healthy for me.
You kind of reminded me of Lord of the Rings here. My precious.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to have a clear separation between your art and your life. And art is a reflection of life. I don't think art should replace life.
Yeah.
And when you're willing to sacrifice your health for your art, I just don't think that's healthy. So whenever I find myself performing a role where I'm just taking it so seriously to the point that it feels unhealthy, that's when I remind myself, okay, we're just telling a story. Hopefully people are inspired by this story in some way. Hopefully this story will make a positive impact, but I don't have to take my work that seriously. And that's what I love about comedy. Whenever I'm performing comedy, I approach it with a little more lightheartedness, with a little more fun. And I just love making people laugh. There's nothing like it. And, but yeah, I do have those moments where I can be very dry. And oftentimes I've been told that by people, and until you get to know me really well, you can't tell when I'm being serious or when I'm joking. I don't mean to confuse anyone like that, but oftentimes when I'm first getting to know someone, I can be very like dry with my jokes. And people will ask me, wait, are you serious?
Are you being serious?
Like, no, that was a joke. I guess I should. So
we were talking earlier about something that you have your own podcast where you critique movies. So what kind of movies do you guys critique?
So Real Takes and Movie Breaks. It's just a film review channel that I started with one of my favorite filmmaking partners. We will watch any movie. I prefer watching movies that are thought-provoking, that aim to be original, that have a little humor. Dark comedies, I typically gravitate towards. It's hard to find films that are original these days, but we'll watch any movie and review it. Because sometimes it is fun to review films that I don't like, because it helps me grow as an artist. And so whenever I am critiquing a film, I try to critique in a respectful way. But I feel like we should definitely be allowed to think critically about film, because how are we going to grow as artists if we're never criticized? You know, like whenever I make a movie, if someone offers constructive criticism, as long as they say it in a respectful way, I'm like, thank you, because this is just going to help me grow. And a lot of art is subjective, you know, so it's just one
totally
opinion.
I've been doing something similar like that with the horror genre because it was not a genre that I particularly gravitated towards. And so now I'm kind of pushing myself to really understand what it's about.
I love that. That's so interesting because I used to always feel when I was younger, I didn't understand why people liked horror movies. I didn't get it when I was younger. I used to think, why would people want to be terrified and disturbed? That makes no sense. Yeah. Don't people want to be happy? Don't people want to laugh? Why do you like horror movies? I didn't get it. And then I started, the older I got and the more I studied filmmaking, I started to realize that sometimes horror movies helps you process fear in a creative way. It helps you process your fear, helps you process trauma, and helps you sort of cope with things that might frighten you. Things that the darker side of humanity that we might try to repress or not think about. Sometimes horror films make you face those things,
right? Exactly,
and deal with them. And when you can deal with them, then they're not as scary anymore. So I do think I do appreciate horror films more than I used to. But that said, they're still not my favorite genre.
Not your go-to. So let's talk about your go-to genres. I know we've spoken about comedies, but what else kind of draws you?
So one of my favorite films, have you ever seen I Heart Huckabees?
I know about it. I have not seen it.
So it's kind of an obscure film. It's very philosophical. It poses a lot of questions about our existence, why we're here, the deep philosophical questions we've been asking for ages. And I love films like that present those types of philosophical views in an entertaining way that you can digest through characters. Those are also the types of films that I like to write and produce. So like Twin Flame Hotel, which you saw.
Yeah, that's right. That was a really interesting one. Actually, let's talk about that one because that one did present some really interesting philosophical questions. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the idea of twin flames is that you found your other half.
Yes. So technically a twin flame, it's this spiritual term. It can have different interpretations, just like everything. But typically it's considered sort of like a soulmate, like a soul that you were meant to come in contact with, but not necessarily be with forever, because you were supposed to learn something through this relationship. So your twin flame is essentially a soul that you were destined to cross paths with for the sake of a learning experience. And sometimes one of them becomes more spiritual, and then the other. So you teach each other something. And so
it's not necessarily your soulmate, but it's somebody you were destined to meet for whatever reason.
Right. And not necessarily like forever. And so I love that idea. And I also just love thinking about how scientific views and spiritual views are very closely aligned. So Twin Flame Hotel is a feature film I co-wrote, co-produced, acted in.
And it was shot almost in one room, too.
Yeah, we had 4 locations, but like 75% of it was shot in just one location.
And that's so hard to pull off. I think you guys did a really good job.
Well, thank you. I'm really glad you got to see it. And we actually won like best feature film at that festival that you saw.
Oh, yeah.
Which was amazing. And I wasn't expecting, this is a movie that we had no budget. We self-funded. We didn't do Kickstarter. We didn't ask anyone to help us. It was just me and a few people that self-funded it. And and that was my biggest concern with it is, are people going to get bored? Because, it's not like 20 different locations, it's very much about 2 characters. But one of our influences was the movies Before Sunset with Ethan Hawke. Have you seen those films? Well, it's basically about 2 characters that have a lot of deep philosophical conversations, and it's, independent, and it's low budget. Well, not as low as ours, but anyway, so that was one of our influences. But But yeah, so my character essentially is symbolic of spirituality or the hope for a deeper meaning. And the other main character represents science, logic, math. So it's these two different philosophies. So we have a lot of, conversation. And it's also about relationships, which everyone can relate to, complications in relationships, love, loss. And there's a little humor in there. I wanted there to be a little humor. There's a little drama, a little romance, and a little sci-fi. So it's kind of like genre bending. But
that's right, because it starts, it seems almost like a time travel experiment.
Yeah. Well, there's elements of quantum mechanics in there and different scientific theories, different spiritual theories. It makes you think. I like movies that are thought-provoking, that make you think and examine, what this life means. So those are the films I really enjoy writing and making. And it's been awesome. We got accepted into a bunch of festivals. We've won a bunch of awards, which I was not expecting.
No, that's great. I mean, it's very well done, especially given the limitations that you guys had.
Yeah, for a low budget, basically no budget movie. It's not too shabby. So I'm really proud of it. It's my first feature film that I produced. I produced a bunch of shorts, but that was my first feature. So.
No, it was great. It really, and like I said, it's very hard to do what you did, which was, you have one room and you're trying to make it interesting with each shot without recycling too many shots.
Yeah.
And so I think a big part of it, of course, had to have been the acting that the two of you did.
Yeah. Yeah, and that role wasn't hard for me to play at all, just because my acting partner is someone I've worked with a lot. And so there's a lot of trust there. And I feel like that's really important, to have trust, to have chemistry. So he and I naturally have chemistry. So that made it pretty easy. It was, it took a lot of work, but there was a lot of joy in it. Working in such a tight space with such a small, we literally had a skeleton crew. I'm surprised that we were able to pull it off, honestly. Like, there were times that I was like, I don't know if this is going to work. Like, people are going to get bored, but it's been really well received. So it's been a pleasant surprise to see how well received it's been.
Yeah. Well, I hope you'll definitely write more stuff like that, because that was really cool. And you and I, of course, both share a love for the science fiction genre, especially because I think we were talking about this earlier before the podcast, but it was about the idea of using this medium, and especially a genre like science fiction, where we get a chance to explore different sociological or political or psychological issues that you would normally not be able to do in some of the other genres. Although horror does have, like you mentioned, a very unique way of doing it as well.
Yes, I do like psychological thrillers. Coming from like a psychological education, I definitely like psychological thrillers more than straight up horror.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I saw one recently. The Heretic.
Oh, I saw that too. I saw it too, yeah.
That's the kind of stuff I like, because it does make you think.
I enjoyed Heretic. I love how both perspectives were presented in a very fair way. Like, I felt like the Heretic, like, I don't want to give anything away if people listen to this, but I felt like the supposed crazy guy played by Hugh Grant, who's still just as charming as ever, by the way.
He did such a great job in that role, because half the time you're like, do you trust him or not?
Well, I didn't trust him from the beginning, but I feel like the trailer gave it away that he's going to be a crazy. The trailers often give too much away these days. I knew he was going to be a crazy. I knew what was going to happen, but he definitely still has that charm. What I thought was interesting is, like, he kind of played the role the same way he played the romantic comedy roles, which made it scary. But I love how both perspectives, like the perspectives of the Mormons and the perspectives that he was throwing out there, they were all fairly represented, because anytime he would try to challenge their beliefs, they would say things that made sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like no matter what you believe, you wouldn't come away from that film thinking it was anti-religion or pro-religion. It kind of poses the questions like, what do you think?
Yeah.
Which I think those films are great I love films that pose questions that make you think without being dogmatic.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I thought it was, I liked it. I actually reviewed it on that channel. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that was a film that surprised me. And what was the other? Oh, Civil War was
Oh, I
another
haven't
one.
seen that one,
Hmm.
but
But they also try to do something similar where they're trying to kind of show both sides, and they changed the situation to where you had people becoming allies that you would never think would join forces
oh,
in
interesting.
order to get
Okay.
past, because they wanted to get past the idea of this just being kind of a an analogy of what's happening, and instead look at the situation.
Okay. Yeah, I was watched that movie. It sounds
Hmm.
like a film I might enjoy.
Yeah, I think so. Because I like going down this exploration, especially with these kind of films. Is there
hmm
another film that kind of jumps out at you that has recently come out?
It's recently come out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, all the films that have recently come out, I've been underwhelmed by. Like I loved Everything Everywhere All at Once.
That was a brilliant film. That's
And
one of my favorite films.
it's funny because when I was watching Everything
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere All at Once, I kept thinking, "Oh my gosh, there are so many ideas in here that are like Twin Flame Hotel, like the movie I
Mm-hmm.
just made."
Mm-hmm.
But at that point, it was still in the editing process, and um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's funny. I will often work on a movie, and while it's in the editing process, I'll see previews for a film that's similar to it, and I think, wow, are there any original ideas anymore? you know. Um, but as far as like a recent film that came out that I was just blown away, I haven't been blown away by any any recent films. That Everything Everywhere All at Once was kind of the last one I really enjoyed. I did also like the film that Nicolas Cage made. Nowadays, Nick Cage will make like anything, but it was the movie that was sort of a commentary on social media. It was
Mm-hmm.
Dream Scenario.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I've been meaning to see that actually. That looks really good.
I would recommend that one because it felt original.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't remind me of every movie I've already seen before. Nicolas Cage is great, and something about him always makes me laugh.
Mm-hmm.
But I like the commentary on social media and how it can be destructive. So,
You just reminded me of the Orville, which is Seth MacFarlane's series.
oh, I haven't seen that.
That one I think you'd like because it combines a couple of different things. It combines comedy with science fiction and with social commentary.
Oh, okay, I
Yeah.
would like that. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'd absolutely enjoy that.
The way he described it was that it was supposed to be like what Star Trek would be if it was a sitcom.
Okay, cool.
So kind of like Galaxy Quest, except that it's like I said, it goes back to what Star Trek was, which is kind of a social commentary.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I started rewatching some Star Trek for our YouTube channel, Real Takes and Movie Breaks,
Mm-hmm.
and I haven't seen a lot of Star Trek shows before.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up not really watching a lot of it. So I'm just now at this point in my
Getting
life
yeah.
like watching Star Trek and understanding its value. I also really like I
Well,
started
it's really interesting because I feel like each series had its own sort of unique take. You had the original series, which my perspective on it was that it's very much geopolitics.
yeah.
Because you had the Romulans, which represented the Chinese, and the Klingons, which represented the Russians. And then you had the Next Generation, which took the idea of politics a step further, but also introduced sociological situations that were happening, including the idea of homosexuality.
Oh, interesting.
But the way they did it was really interesting because they came across a race that was asexual.
Oh.
And was exploring the idea of being a dual sexual race,
Huh. Okay.
even though they're all the same sex. In Seth MacFarlane's The Orville, they explored that as well because there was a planet that was all male.
All male. So how do they procreate?
I don't know. They never got into that.
Because that would be my first question. Like, okay, how do you procreate? Like,
but in terms of their world, they were kind of making fun of the male stereotypes. It's like, what would a planet full of just guys be like?
Oh, that sounds funny. Yeah, I don't know if I don't know if that planet would be a good planet or too much testosterone.
That's kind of what they were making fun of.
Well, I feel like balance is important. The balance of everything.
Right. That's kind of what it was. And so each character had sort of their little niche of what they were representing. So you had that one character that represented that, and you had another one that was kind of like Data's character in Next Generation, which was an exploration of becoming human, what it actually meant. And then you had, I'm trying to remember the Deep Space Nine, which was about the state of war. Like most series, though, I will say that for some reason the series of that era, from the 80s into the 90s, you have to get to the fourth season before things really start getting good. I don't know what it was about the fourth season, but it was always the fourth season.
Yeah, I feel like sometimes with shows, there's so much dramatic buildup before you get to the good stuff.
Yeah. But that's great. I'm actually like really thrilled because this is something I didn't know about you.
Mm-hmm. What is?
That you like these types of genres and films and stories.
I just love any movies that make you think about the meaning of life. And movies that make you laugh at yourself, and films that try to elevate awareness in a way that isn't dogmatic.
When I saw your film, I was talking to a friend of mine that saw she had actually wanted me to see it as well. This documentary about the twin flame.
Oh, that's completely different.
Right.
That was like a cult, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
So what we thought was really funny was that we were still talking about that by the time I went to go see your film.
That's funny. So you thought it might be about like that cult.
No, but I thought it was going to be somewhat related to it. But I like the direction you guys took it. But we took it as kind of an interesting thing that we almost like, well, this film was something I had to intersect.
Yeah. I have heard of this documentary about some creepy cult called Twin Flames. And
it was supposed to originally, I think they started off as kind of like a help dating thing. And then it just got weird.
Yeah, I do find cults interesting because if you think about it, like a lot of our practices that we do in the average American society are a bit culty. Like you could consider any religion kind of culty. You could consider a lot of our traditions a little bit culty. Like if you're in a sorority or fraternity, it's kind of a cult. But I just feel like some cults are healthier than other cults.
Well,
so
I think any organization that helps you become a better person is probably positive, but as soon as you start blocking out the rest of the world, then you kind of have to probably question that.
That's right. Like I think I'm going to start my own cult, but it's going to be like an all-inclusive cult that anyone is welcome. It's funny, I teach yoga and some people think of that as kind of like, when I'm teaching like mantras or like mudras or, sometimes we'll have chanting. They think of that as sort of culty. I'm like, well, I guess I can understand, the term cult is semantics, right? But yoga is all about unity and uniting. And so, yeah, maybe I'll create a cult and it'll be all about creating more unity in the world and less division. Well, if you think about the film industry, the film industry itself can be viewed as very much a cult, especially the Hollywood bubble. Like there's all kinds of crazy theories about the Illuminati and like, I mean, I've heard stories, but there's the film industry itself could be viewed as a bit of a
well, let's talk about that for a second, because you've picked one of the careers in this industry that I think is very difficult, in terms of being able to survive just doing that. So how do you do it?
Well, I have no expectations anymore. I don't ever expect that I'm going to book a role. I was actually lucky because I was fortunate enough to have college professors, and even I remember my high school teacher, Daniel Devlin, told me this. The average working actor books 1 out of 100 auditions.
Wow.
So I was prepared to not get my hopes up, where I feel like a lot of young actors might have different teachers that give them this sense of like, oh, it's not as hard as people think. Or they tell them all these stories about, oh, this person just got lucky in a mall. Like those are the exceptions.
Right.
Those are not those like overnight success stories are not realistic. They're the exception. So I feel like I went into this industry knowing that the odds were against me as an actor. And every time I tape an audition, my goal now is to just enjoy the process. You hear the quote, it's not about the destination, it's the journey. And I really try to adopt that when I'm taping auditions, because taping auditions is a lot of work. I never know when I'm going to get one. As soon as my agent sends me an audition, I have to read it. I have to figure out when I'm going to tape it, who I'm going to tape it with. And I have to tape it as soon as possible, because a lot of casting directors watch them on a rolling basis. So the earlier you tape the audition, the more likely it is you might actually even get seen or book it. So it can be stressful, especially because I work, I teach classes every day. So sometimes the only time I have to tape auditions is late at night. And I end up sacrificing sleep at times just to tape auditions.
To get them done. Yeah.
But I still try to have fun with the auditions and look at it as an opportunity to explore my craft, to practice my craft. And as soon as I'm done with the audition, I let it go. And I don't think about it anymore. I don't expect to book it. I never expect to book it. I think going into it, hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst, kind of like an optimistic cynic, you're not going to get disappointed. And also, I think I've really enjoyed creating my own work as an actor, like writing my own shorts, producing my own shorts, working with friends, having friends in the industry. I'm part of this little comedy collective where we were actually performing comedy shows throughout the entire pandemic outside at Ponce City Market, because during, the height of COVID in 2020, people weren't as nervous being outside in the open air. So we were still performing comedy shows. And I feel like laughter and humor was really needed during that time.
It really was. Yeah.
So, being a part of little communities, cults like that.
Going back to that.
Just having friends in the industry that are aligned with me as far as like having fun with the craft. Like my favorite artists to work with are people that have fun on set, that are focused yet playful. Like you can still be focused and proficient and very time efficient, yet still be playful and relaxed, right? So those are my favorite artists to collaborate with. I just shot this fun little short film for this film festival called the Naughty or Nice Film Festival. And everybody I worked with on that, Nate Doran, like filmed it. Everybody I worked, they have like a comedy background. And so it was just so much fun because we were very focused, but we got it, we knocked it out like within a day. Very focused, very time efficient, but also relaxed and playful. I think if you lose that sense of joy in what you're doing, that sense of fun, then it's kind of
why are you doing
pointless,
Yeah.
So that's usually my approach when it comes to acting, writing, producing, is to always remember to find the joy. And if you can't find the joy, create the joy for yourself and for everyone you're working with.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm always trying to make sure everyone on set is having fun, having moments of fun. Yes, obviously we have to focus. We can't be running around like delaying the schedule, but also there's a balance, right? So.
No, I think so. I was going to say that I'm glad you actually said that, because I remember somebody asking me, why I got into my particular field. And some of my colleagues would say, well, I'm trying to be a ASCDP or something like that. And it just occurred to me that that's the wrong answer. It's not about being the best. It's about telling stories and enjoying the craft you're doing. It's like, why else would you be doing this?
Yeah, I mean, it's oftentimes a thankless pursuit, for the average working actor. Like, I'm fortunate enough, I've booked some roles on TV. I've worked a lot, but like not everybody that's an actor gets those opportunities. And that's why I love Atlanta so much, is Atlanta is a great place for independent film.
It really is.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise me that the film industry has blossomed as well as it does here. Incentives aside, I think the community has really come together and made it what it is.
Yeah.
Because I haven't seen this level of community support in some of the other cities that I've been in.
Yeah, I'm very grateful. I'm surrounded by supportive artists, and it's all mutually supportive. Like, whenever my friends are in comedy shows or just doing live theater, I love to go and see their shows and support, vice versa. And I also, to answer your question, the way I get through kind of like the stress of it and sort of like the tough part of pursuing this art form is I don't...
Because it is difficult. I mean, especially being an actor is like not just the financial side of it, but also the fact that you're on an emotional roller coaster depending on the character you're playing.
Exactly. So another way I kind of get through it is I remind myself of how I measure success. So if I were to measure my success as an actor on the amount of TV bookings I got or the amount of awards I got, then that feels kind of vain. So this is how I measure success. If I make a movie and it's fortunate enough to get into a festival and I get to go to the festival and see the audience respond live and I get to hear their laughter, or I get to see their tears, and I get to actually talk to them and hear firsthand how my film has impacted them, that to me, I feel successful. I feel like if I can tell stories that impact the audience in a meaningful, positive way, then I feel successful. And then if we have fun in the process, I feel successful. I don't measure my success based on the amount of TV bookings or the amount of film bookings or the amount of money I've made. But I also don't put all of my self-worth into my acting career. Like I know a lot of actors, it's easy to confuse your self-worth with your career success. And I don't equate the two. They're two very different things. My self-worth is based on other things besides my acting career, and I have other passions too, like acting and filmmaking are not my only passions.
Right,
I teach health. I teach yoga, nutrition, tai chi, ballet. I'm a teacher, and I'm very much just as passionate about teaching people those healthy practices as I am about like acting and filmmaking. So I think because it's not my only passion, it's not as hard for me to get. I do get discouraged, but I don't get as discouraged as someone who might put all their eggs in the film industry basket.
It's a make or break.
Yeah. I've talked to some artists where, I've heard them say things like, well, this is my life. I can't imagine myself happy doing anything other than an acting career. And to me, I just don't think that's a healthy mentality, because there's so much more to life than just movies. I mean, like, like I was saying before, art is a reflection of life. I think it's just as important as artists to live a real, healthy life and enjoy life experiences outside of filmmaking. And that's what helps you become a better artist and a better storyteller for your audience.
Yeah, I had a film school professor say the exact same thing. He's like, get out of your dorm, go out there, live your life.
Yeah, and it gives you more of a perspective. It's like, what's the point of telling stories if you don't have a life as your reference point? You know, I think real life is more of a priority to me, and then my career falls secondary to that. So my relationships with people in my real life are definitely more important than my acting career.
Yeah. I was going to say, because this is a really interesting business where you kind of do develop some very intimate relationships with the people you're around because of, well, sometimes the physical space that you're in, but just the amount of hours that you're with each other.
Which is one of the things I love about the process, especially doing theater. Because whenever I'm working on a show, I often feel like the rehearsal process, you bond so much with your cast and your director. You feel like a little family. And then after the run of the show, it's very bittersweet because a part of me is kind of sad that it's over. And then another part of me is kind of happy because I can, move on to the next chapter. Because sometimes when I'm performing in a show, it does consume so much of my time, my energy. So much of my thoughts are centered around the show. And so I get really, really, it's this bittersweet kind of beautiful thing that you get to step into this other reality for a while and develop a little family. And then, you part ways and you go on to other projects. And so I love that aspect of theater and film too. With film, there's not as much of a rehearsal process usually. I mean, sometimes there is, depending on, the scope of the film. But yeah, I mean, you develop relationships, and but I also think it's important to have a healthy boundary with that as well. You hear about these like Hollywood celebrities that they play a romantic part with someone, and then they end up dating in real life. And I think I feel like when I'm playing a role, it's very much separated from who I am. Like I have to find authenticity in that moment. So in that moment, I become that role. But then I separate myself and I put it away.
Right.
I don't confuse reality for performance.
Right.
And so I think it's very important for actors to have that healthy and compartmentalized in their mind. Like just because I'm making out with you in the scene, that doesn't mean we're going to date in real life. You know what I mean? So I've learned in yoga and resetting my nervous system, it really does help me have that separation. So I like to maintain healthy friendships and healthy boundaries in the industry.
Yeah. Well, I just think it's such a unique industry because of how close we all get.
Yeah.
Not just amongst your acting peers, but because you're there with the crew too. Whether it's your set dresser or your hair and makeup, that are always there with
Yeah. No, it's very interesting. Oftentimes, I feel like the hair and makeup person I bond with so much because depending on how long that takes. They're often like asking questions, and
especially if you're doing like effects makeup.
Yeah, effects makeup. You're with them for like hours, right? It does make a big difference. I feel like with filmmaking, every part is so important. Sometimes people think like, oh, the director's all that's, it's the director's the most important role. Well, I mean, yeah, the directors, if obviously it's their vision.
They're guiding the creative process, but it's a collaborative effort amongst the different talents.
Yeah, I mean, you can have a director, but if the director doesn't communicate well, like to the crew, then I mean, oftentimes, yes, the director is the guiding force, but every role is very, very important. There's no, like the sound is so important, the visual quality. Yeah. And I mean, you can have really good writing, but unfortunately, like if it's not shot well, the execution,
it'll fall flat.
Yeah. Or you can have like really great cinematography, but if the writing is just lame, it doesn't matter.
Or bad acting.
Yeah. Same thing. Like you can have great writing, but if the actors don't know how to bring it to life, or if you have really great actors, but the writing is bad. Oh, great actors can only do so much with really bad writing. Yeah. So every aspect of film, I feel like is so important.
It's all got to come together.
Yeah. And whenever I'm on set, I do try to get to know people as best as I don't want to be distracting, and like, let's talk while you're getting ready, but
it's like, oh, you're lifting something heavy here. Let's talk.
Right. I do, I do try to stay within, my bounds as an act, and just, I will say this though, for people who write, produce, and act, I feel like the next time I don't think I'm going to do that again, because I've done that a lot. And
it's a lot. It's a lot of responsibility.
It's too much to wear all those hats, because if you've written if you're a co-writer, you've written part of the story, it means more to you than if you just step in as an actor. And also if you're like co-producing something, yet it's shoot day, sometimes it's hard to just step back and just be an actor when it's your story, and it means more to you than that. So I feel like it's better when everything's very organized and everyone knows what their role is, and one person isn't trying to direct, act, produce. What I mean?
Right, they're spreading themselves pretty thin.
Yeah. So I mean, I've done it before and it's turned out fine, but I think next time I'm just going to do one role.
No, I totally understand that. Yeah. I've had people ask me, if I like having an operator, and you've been with me on sets where I have an operator. It allows me to be closer to the director, and that's where I prefer to be. Yeah. I love operating, obviously. Obviously, because that's where I came from. But, I think just like you that sometimes wearing one hat makes me better at that one thing than trying to spread myself.
Exactly. Like if I'm an actor, I should be thinking about character preparation and getting in the mindset of my character and doing all my actor prep stuff. I shouldn't be worried like if the director is going to be able to do this, or if like the communication has been, you know what I mean? I shouldn't be worried about that, right? I should just be focused on acting. So
yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. All right, here's where you're going to get a little bit of a surprise, because since you haven't been listening to my podcast.
I know, I have such a long list. You've interviewed so many people that I love and respect as artists, and I really want to listen to it.
I've had such a great time doing it. I've learned a lot from everyone that comes on this show. But now we get to my favorite part, the James Lipton, otherwise known as the Bernard Pivot questionnaire.
Okay, I wasn't expecting this. I like it. Off the cuff.
What is your favorite word?
Love.
I can totally see that. That does embody you. What is your least favorite word?
Least favorite word. I love so many words. I don't have a word I just hate. But I think I start to dislike a word if it's commonly misused.
Oh, like literally.
Literally is so commonly overly used, misused. Exactly. That's an example. Or improper, like when people say, I could care less. That's a whole phrase. But the correct phrase is actually, I couldn't care less. Because if you could care less, that doesn't make sense. The correct phrase is, I could not care less about what you're saying. Not I could care. Anyway, things like that. But as far as one word that I just hate, I think the word like, but only when it's used. And it's because...
like totally.
Yeah, when people say things like just hearing it a lot, it gets on my nerves. Now, I do it too. Don't get me wrong. I probably do it way more than I even realize or want to. But I think when someone's talking and then I start hearing that word a lot, I'm like, I don't like it.
That's a good one. I like that. Oh man, I just used the word like. Oh well. What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Originality. Hope. A good sense of humor. An open mind. Kindness. Selflessness. And living with purpose, with intention.
What turns you off? Which I think you kind of mentioned.
I feel like when an artist is more interested in their career, making money, than they are the craft of story, than the audience. When the artist I'm working with cares more about their ego or how they look to others than the audience and the impact they're going to have on the audience. That turns me off.
What is your favorite curse word?
So it's funny. I don't really like to curse a lot.
Yeah, it's like, I don't think I've heard you curse.
Occasionally I do, but my favorite one...
Rats.
No, I don't really like curse words because I feel like they're just kind of lame. They're too easy. Like there's always a better word to use, a more intelligent word than a curse word. You know what I'm saying? So I think, but I guess the one I use the most is fuck. So that's probably the one I use the most, but I don't even say it very much, only in certain contexts. I
was like, I don't think I've heard you curse. So yeah. What sound or noise do you love?
I love binaural beats. I listen to binaural beats when I go to sleep, like the 528 frequencies. And I love the sound of Om.
What sound or noise do you hate?
Cry. Well, I just don't like to hear people cry or yell in like a hateful way. I don't like the sound of voices yelling.
What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Well, originally I was going to be a psychology major and become a counselor. My dad's a counselor. My twin sister's a counselor. It runs in my family. I love helping people. But then I decided to major in theater and minor in psychology. So, I already help people a lot with like meditation, mindfulness, healthy eating.
So you're just doing it in a different way.
But I feel like if I were to pursue a different career path, it would be related to kind of counseling.
Yeah, I can totally see that. That's great. What profession would you not like to do?
Well, I've had many serving jobs in my day, so I would never want to. I've had so many different serving jobs, waiting tables, and I would not want to do that again.
If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Oh, wow. That's such a great question. Yes, the soul is eternal and love is real.
I like that.
Reassurance that love is real and that the soul is eternal. If heaven existed.
Kimberly, thank you so much for coming in today. This has been an absolute thrill. I've learned so much about you. Like I had no idea that you were so deep into. Yes, this is amazing and wonderful, and I love the fact that I've had the pleasure of working with you as well.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. I love those questions. I hadn't answered questions like that in a long time, so I appreciate it.
Hopefully, you and I will be able to do a science fiction film at some point.
Yes, I would love to. We have to put it on the bucket list.
We need to put it on. And thank you everyone for listening, and we'll see you guys on set.
Thanks for listening.